Okay, 1 Samuel chapter 15 is both super complicated to wrestle with, as well as super enlightening as to this current season that we're in, which is the Advent season. We're going to start, because that's how the passage starts, with the super challenging part. And we're going to get into why it's so challenging. But I'll give you a hint. It's because you're Canadian. Okay? This is why this is challenging. So it says, Samuel said to Saul, remember Samuel's the priest, Saul's the king, I am the one that the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. Okay, so now here's the message from God. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. We can read about this in the book of Deuteronomy. Now go, attack the Amalekites, and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death the men and the women, the children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. Okay, does anyone see the challenging part right here? Okay, if you don't, it said kill the children and the infants. Now this is something, if you've ever watched a debate or ever had any sort of discussion with an atheist, this is clearly one of the ones. It's one of those, as has been referred to in more recent language, the clobber passages that we find in the Bible. These are the ones you just go and you give the big right hook. What do you mean? Your God is genocidal. Look at, kill the children and the infants. This is a difficult passage to wrestle through. And as I already indicated before, it's because we're Canadian. It's because we have this, where do we derive our morals from? Now, most of us, being that we're in a church here, would like to say, I derive my morality from God. And I would hope that is true. But the fact of the matter is that we do not live inside of a bubble, right? We live in the greater world. We live with the world. And so the world does have an influence on us. And quite frankly, the world has its certain rules, because as we're going to get into later, we like to look at things not in black and white, but of shades of gray. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that, number one, we don't look at sin as bad enough. Right? That is a big problem that we have. We say, yeah, but it's just a little bit of sin, it's okay. To which I would say, man, if I poured you a nice, wonderful, cool, crisp glass of water and I hand it to you, you'd be like, wow, thank you, this is delicious. And then I took a toothpick and I stuck it in a turd and then I stirred it into your water. Even if you don't see it, you just watch that happen. Are you now willing, and I'm so glad Ethan isn't here. Are you glad now? Are you going to drink that glass of water? Right? And that's why I said I'm glad Ethan is not here, because he'd be like, yeah, it's called lunch. Right? There's a disgust that wells up inside of us. Why would you do that? That is disgusting. It is a very black and white issue. I am not going to partake in that. And the problem is that we like to look at sin more gray, because we're trying to make it palatable for us, because we know we sin. But the fact of the matter is, we're not talking about us, we're talking about God. Right? The one who sets morality, the one who is King of Kings. And when he looks at it, he sees it as, that's not just a little bit of sin, that's a little bit of turd in my water, and I'm not going to have it. Okay? Disgusting. Now again, we don't necessarily have all the details and stuff like this. Why did he order what he did? I will say this: we see it time and time and time again in the Bible. It is revealed to us over and over and over again that God doesn't just go and kill innocents. That what he does is he waits until the total measure of sin has been reached. That there is a total depravity. That there is no willingness at all to serve the Lord before he sends his wrath. He did the same with Noah and the flood. He did the same with the Canaanites before he would allow the Israelites to leave Egypt. Remember, they waited there for hundreds of years because it said it wasn't yet time for the Canaanites to be judged. All of this happens in God's time because God wants it, and we see it again like with Lot in the city of Sodom. Right? God waits until there is no one left before he brings wrath. But eventually, judgment and justice must be had. And it's hard for us to deal with. It's hard for us to understand. But again, I think it's because we're human and we try to make things palatable for ourselves. We like to think of ourselves sometimes as even a higher morality than God because, well, I would never do this. You're absolutely right. But I do know the things that you would do. Knowing that God is perfect, I have to believe that what he is ordering here, he ordered for a reason. And so in verse 4 it says, so Saul summoned the men and mustered them at Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers. You can see the army has grown significantly. Remember last time we were talking about just, 3,000? Now we're at 200,000 foot soldiers, and 10,000 of those were from Judah. Saul went to the city of Amalek and set an ambush in the ravine. And then he said to the Kenites, go away, leave the Amalekites, so I do not destroy you along with them, for you showed kindness to all the Israelites, and they came as they came up out of Egypt. So the Kenites moved away from the Amalekites. Now what's interesting about that is that every single one of the Kenites who helped every single one of the Israelites at that time, all of them are all dead. This is a generational pass that has been given down. This is interesting. And it really shows that, our actions today are going to have repercussions for our children. In this case, for the Kenites, it was good things. Right? The Kenites were saved. They were put aside because of the kindness that they showed generations before. So don't think that your actions are meaningless. It says, then Saul attacked the Amalekites all the way from Havilah to Shur near the eastern border of Egypt. That is a long way. I don't know if you know the map of the Middle East, although it's been on TV a whole lot recently. But it's a long way across there, across the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt, which of course wasn't Egypt at that time. It is today, but it wasn't then. And it says he took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive. Did it say spare the king? No, it didn't. It didn't say spare the king, but he took him alive, and all of his people he totally destroyed with the sword. But Saul and the army, I like how the Bible puts this. Saul and the army, right? That's an inclusive statement, means both. This is going to be important later because Saul's going to try and squirm out of it like the worm he's behaving like. Saul and the army spared Agag and the best of the sheep and cattle, the fat calves, lambs, and everything that was good. These they were unwilling to destroy. They were unwilling to destroy completely, but everything that was despised and weak was totally destroyed. And why is this important? It's important because of this. Then the word came to Samuel, I regret that I made Saul king because he has turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions. And Samuel was angry, and he cried out to the Lord all night. And early in the morning, Samuel got up and went to meet Saul, but he was told, Saul has gone to Carmel. And we know a lot about Saul at this point. Saul's becoming a very interesting fellow. It says there, in Carmel, he has set up a monument to the honor of the Lord. No. In his honor. Saul's honor. He doesn't even recognize God's provision. He doesn't recognize God's might. He doesn't recognize what God is doing here. We're seeing again the path of narcissism that is being laid out before them and what exactly it's going to be leading to. Right? The self-indulgence, the self-aggrandizing. This is not good behavior. Anyway, so he set up this monument in his own honor at Carmel, and he has turned and gone down to Gilgal. And when Samuel reached him, Saul says, the Lord bless you. I have carried out the Lord's instructions. Right? He knows he's lying. He knows he didn't do what the Lord said, but he says it anyway. And this sounds like a parent right here. This is like the exact kind of same thing that I would say to Claire. But then Samuel says, so what then is this bleating of sheep in my ears? What is this of the lowing of cattle that I hear? If you destroyed everything as the Lord commanded, where did all these animals come from? What's going on, Saul? I thought of this as we were getting ready. It's like how, many of us have children or have been children. We've all been children. And believe it or not, children. Imagine being told to go to your room and clean up. And as you're getting ready and you're cleaning up, you decide, you know what? Instead of fulfilling the task, I'm going to do something special for mom and dad. I'm going to build a blanket fort instead, and then that way it'll be the special thing for them. And then guess what? When mom and dad come and check it out, are they going to be happy? There you go, Nora. There's your pass. No. Why? Because it wasn't what you were asked to do. And then Saul answers, and this is what I meant when I said he was a worm. The soldiers brought them from the Amalekites. They, look at this. He's not saying we did this. He's completely gone from, I was a part of this to, no, it was them. It was them over there. I had nothing to do with this, Samuel. Like, God spared me. They spared the best of the sheep and the cattle, but because they wanted to sacrifice to the Lord, and this is an interesting thing too, Lord your God. He does this a lot. And we don't see the other kings do this, especially David, right? For David, it's the Lord my God, because it's David's God. But Saul's always had this weird relationship with God. And he doesn't refer to God as his God. He refers to it as Samuel's God. This is your God, Samuel. And you're going to see, now that I've mentioned it, you're going to notice he says it over and over and over again. This is just a repetitive thing for Saul. But we totally destroyed the rest. Mom and dad, maybe I built this blanket fort, but look, I put the socks away. I did half of it. Enough, Samuel said to Saul. See, like a parent. That's what a parent would say. Enough, come on. You kidding me? Let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night. Tell me, Saul replied. Samuel said, although you were one, okay, by the way, and this is the thing that I think is exciting, and I want to see if you guys pick it up when we go through this. Although you were once small in your own eyes, did you not become the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king over Israel, and he sent you on a mission saying, go and completely destroy these wicked people, the Amalekites. Wage war against them until you've wiped them out. Why did you not obey? Why did you pounce on the plunder and do evil in the eyes of the Lord? Right? We've seen this behavior over and over again as well with the people of Israel, that whenever there's plunder involved, they just can't help themselves. And I mean, we see this traditionally with armies, no matter whether it's Israel or not, right? I don't want to say that this is a human problem that we all have. When we do all this hard work, we do all these things, and we feel like, well, that's mine. It's rightfully mine. I earned this. I did this. But I did obey the Lord, Saul said. I went on the mission the Lord assigned me. I completely destroyed the Amalekites and brought back Agag, their king. The soldiers took sheep and cattle. See, again, the soldiers did it. He doesn't take responsibility. See, this is a big difference between David and Saul, because later on, when the people of Israel are being judged, David says, this was my sin, this was my fault, and he owns everything, because he recognizes, as we like to say today, that the buck stops with him. He is the king. He is responsible. He has the authority, and it was his responsibility. But not Saul. He says the soldiers took sheep and cattle from the plunder, the best of what was devoted to God. Again, but I did it for you, God. Yeah, I didn't listen to you. Yeah, I didn't obey, but I did it for you. In order to sacrifice them to the Lord your God. Of course, you're going to hear it now because I'm going to read it weird. At Gilgal. Samuel replied, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? What's that mean? It's not about doing the law. It was never about doing the law. What did God want? He just wanted people who loved him and obeyed him, who went after his heart. That was it. Was it about the sacrifice? Remember, the sacrifices were part of the ritual, part of the That was not it. Although God, yes, took delight in those things, that was not what made them special. It is not. It was the grace of God. It was God looking for people who would serve him, who would love him for who he was. To obey is better than sacrifice. To heed is better than the fat of rams. And yeah, every parent here went, yeah, of course, with our children, that's exactly, you know what? Why do we want our children to obey us? Because we're trying to help them. I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I'm hoping that each and every one of you parents agrees with me, because we want to help our children become the very best versions of themselves. We want to set them up for success, and the reason that we ask them and we give them instructions to do certain things is because we're trying to get them to a place that is going to propel them further in their future. And what do you think God wants to do with us? Right? We're his children. What do you think God is setting us up for? Why do you think God set them up to do these things? See, sometimes we try and make these moral, weighty things on God, and we say, well, God doesn't know any better. I'm wiser than God because I would do a more moral thing. No, you wouldn't, because you can't see the whole picture. God can. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, the arrogance, like the evil of idolatry, right? He's trying to say how repulsive he finds this. You have put turd in my water. Because you've rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. Then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned. Finally, he's taking some responsibility. Because much like a child, once you've called them out enough, eventually you can usually get them to finally own up. That's kind of what, as a parent, we're hoping for. We're trying to get the child to that point where, okay, yes, you finally acknowledged it. Good. I have sinned. I have violated the Lord's command and your instructions. I was afraid of the men. Again, he's still making excuses. He's the king. And so I gave in to them. Now I beg you, forgive my sin and come back with me so that I may worship the Lord. But Samuel said to him, I will not go back with you. You have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you as king over Israel. And as Samuel turned to leave, Saul caught hold of the hem of his robe and tore it. Samuel said to him, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today and has given it to one of your neighbors, to one better than you. He who is the glory of Israel does not lie or change his mind, for he is not a human being, and that he should change his mind. Who are they talking about here? Exactly. I don't know who said it. I heard it whispered, but Samuel this is another prophecy of Jesus coming in. He will be the King of Kings. He will be the one that steps in. See, a lot of us, when we read through this real quickly, we go, oh yeah, he's talking about David because David's going to be the next king. He's not talking about David. David's still human. David makes a lot of human mistakes. But he's talking about, I'm going to be giving this over to my son, that he will rule. That it will be his kingdom, the kingdom of heaven. Saul replied, I have sinned, but please honor me before the elders of my people and before Israel. Come back with me so I may worship the Lord your God. See, there it is again. So Samuel went back with Saul, and Saul worshipped the Lord. And then Samuel said, bring me Agag, king of the Amalekites. And Agag came to him in chains, and he thought, surely the bitterness of death is past. But Samuel was going to do what the Lord intended. As your sword has made women childless, so will your mother be made childless among women. And Samuel put Agag to death before the Lord at Gilgal. Samuel completed what Saul would not. Then Samuel left for Ramah, but Saul went up to his home in Gibeah of Saul, and until the day that Samuel died, he did not go see Saul again. And though Samuel mourned for him, and the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel. There's a couple amazing things we can take out of this. Number one, sometimes God will ask us to do difficult things. Very challenging things that we don't necessarily understand at the time. We see this, God makes these kind of requests of people time and time again throughout the Bible. And we see how well they are rewarded when they believe and just trust in God, right? That's what it means, by the way, to have faith, is to have trust. We put our faith in God because we trust him. We believe that he's going to lead us into right living and rightness. And we have to sometimes trust that God knows better than us. That seems maybe like a wild thing to say. In fact, when you hear it, you go, yeah, of course God knows better than us. But how often does our behavior actually reflect that attitude? Or do we sometimes think, well, no, I know better than God, so I'm not going to listen to this part of the Bible or this part of the Bible? It's also interesting to remember, too, that the Bible doesn't always tell us exactly what God wants, but it also shows us the failure of man. And in this case, it shows us the path that if we don't choose, right? I've said this before, it's not just the do's, it's also the don'ts. It's saying, look, if you go down this path of self-indulgence, of loving yourself and doing these things, it's not going to go well for you. In fact, you will gain the whole world, as Jesus put it, but lose your soul. Saul maybe was king of this world, he was king in this world, but he lost everything. And in the end, he's going to have nothing as we get closer to the end of the story. But Samuel brought forth a hope that we're going to be getting ready to celebrate here in a couple weeks. The hope that was brought into the world, that was the birth of Jesus Christ coming into this place, coming down onto earth, bringing light and hope back to us. It was a hope that they would have to wait hundreds of years for. But it was a hope nonetheless. It was a promise nonetheless. It was prophecy nonetheless. As we go forward into Christmas this year, let's keep this kind of thing in mind, right? We have different paths that we can choose. And it's why I keep referring to David, even though we haven't read about him yet, because most of us know all the different stories about David. We've heard all these things about David. And why is that? Because even though David made mistakes, like each and every one of us, he was a man after God's own heart. Or we can choose to be Saul, who was powerful and wealthy, and he by all measures of the world, he attained great levels of success. But in the end, he had nothing. He lost everything. He sacrificed too much. Not for the Lord, but for himself. He was self-indulgent, self-aggrandizing, and it cost him everything. As we come into the Christmas season, let's keep that in mind. Keep a heart of joy and gratitude, and find our morals in the Lord and not in the world. Let's be guided by him and not what we think is best. Because sometimes we don't think bad is bad enough. And that can be a real problem for us.